Let me preface this. Let me preface this really quickly with saying one important thing before we start. The government should fear its citizens 100% of the time. Unironically, and without a hint of jokes, the government should fear the people, period. Because the alternative is the people fear the government, and that is fucking tyranny. You should become a government agent or official reluctantly in the service of your fellow man, not thinking that you get to be an administrator or controller of their fucking property and their fucking rights. We have twisted government service into a position of power, but the word is government service, and the service is not to the government, but to the people. And these motherfuckers lord over us as a new aristocracy, a new ruling class of nobility. And they do so openly and in our faces. The founding fathers would roll in their fucking graves to see how we treat the government today. They should serve in fearful respect, in the same way that the Bible uses fear, reverence of their God. Because the populace, the people, the citizenry are the God of government, not the other way around. Whatever you think about January 6th, for one moment, Congress was reminded what it was to be afraid of the citizenry. And they should have asked themselves in that moment why they deserved the fear that they had. Because they lost the trust of the governed. They lost the trust of the people they committed to serve, because they didn't serve them, they ruled them. In the United States, we do not, friends, we do not have rulers. We have public servants. They have forgotten that. They have forgotten what public service means. We do not have rulers, and we never, ever should. So that's my preface for this video. And if you're uncomfortable with those ideas, stick around and I'll give you reasons to be comfortable with them.
With documentary kind of feel to it, this will be the most highly produced congressional hearing in history.
Lisa Desjardins, let's go quickly to the chair.
There you go, right there. I'm not going to pause a lot, but this is a point that merits addressing. I told you at the beginning what these congressional hearings were. These are the Democrats running as hard as they can on the only popular issue that they have, which is January 6th. And again, whatever you think about January 6th, I don't care. I'm fully willing to accept people saying January 6th was an insurrection. Okay, you can have that opinion. I will slightly disagree. I think it was stupid. I don't think it was an insurrection under the definition and under the practicality of it. But I get where you have that idea. Okay, so just hang with me for a minute. Whatever you think about it, What is happening to it is political theater of the highest order, and the people involved, if they actually committed the heinous crimes they are accused of, should have already been prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, because I guarantee you that we are now 2 years and 5 months away from when this happened. No, wait, 1 year and 5 months. Fuck. 1 year and 5 months away from when this happened. There's no new evidence to be gathered. There's no new information to be brought against these people. There's nothing pending in the wings. There's nothing waiting for them to be charged and criminally convicted if they are guilty. The only motivation for it is political leverage. And that, left or right, should disgust you, because even if you are on the left and you fully buy into the Democrat narrative about January 6th rather than the Republican narrative, they're both narratives. Don't accuse me of being biased in this regard. I'm personally biased in a couple different ways. But the Republican narrative exists and the Democrat narrative exists. Rather than buying into the Democrat narrative, justice would be served by a swift prosecution as required under the law, and they could be put in jail. But this isn't about the prosecution, and this isn't about the administration of justice. This is about weaponizing a political opportunity for personal fucking power. And left or right, that should disgust you. And if it doesn't disgust you yet, stay tuned.
Chair Benny Thompson.
Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare the committee in recess at any point. Pursuant to House Deposition Authority Regulation 10, the chair announces the committee's approval to release the deposition material presented during tonight's hearing. Thanks to everyone watching tonight for sharing part of your evening to learn the facts and causes of the events leading up to and including the violent attack on January 6, 2021, our democracy, electoral system, and country. I'm Benny Thompson, chairman of the January...
What was that? What was that? Our electoral system, democracy, and country. Notice that was an unattached phrase, but it was mildly attached to the attacks on January 6th. He can't honestly link them because none of those three things were actually under attack on January 6th. Whatever happened that day, none of those three things were literally under attack or in any danger of any compromise. The only thing they can do is make these tangential, partial links. His subconscious honesty prevented him from linking them through language. He had to only connect them by inference. And it's, again, even if all of those people are guilty of every crime they're accused of, none of those three institutions were actually in danger or in peril from what happened on January 6th. And that fucking dishonesty is what will sink them in their efforts here.
2021 committee. I was born, raised, and still live in Bolton, Mississippi.
Good.
A town with a population of 521.
That's 522
which is midway between Jackson and Vicksburg, Mississippi, and the Mississippi River. I'm from a part of the country where people justify the actions of slavery, the Ku Klux Klan, and lynching. I'm reminded of that dark history as I hear voices today try and justify the actions of the insurrectionists on January 6, 2021.
Here we go. God fucking damn it. I'm not supposed to be pausing this. This motherfucker just linked January 6th to the KKK. If you want to know what a fucking lie is, there it is. That's a liar lying right now about the fucking facts.
Next few weeks, hopefully you will get to know the other members, my colleagues up here, and me. We represent a diversity of communities from all over the United States, rural areas and cities, East Coast, West Coast, and the Heartland. All of us have one thing in common. We swore the same oath.
And you all fucking violated it, you fucking communists!
Same oath that all members of Congress take upon taking office and afterwards every 2 years if they are reelected. We swore an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Then kill yourselves in Minecraft, because you are the enemies of the Constitution. Congress has been the enemies of the Constitution since 1912.
The words of the current oath taken by all of us that nearly every United States government employee takes have their roots in the Civil War. Throughout our history, the United States has fought against foreign enemies to preserve our democracy, electoral system, and country. When the United States Capitol was stormed and burned in 1814, foreign enemies were responsible. Afterward, in 1862, when American citizens had taken up arms against this country, Congress adopted a new oath to help make sure no person who had supported the rebellion could hold a position of public trust.
Without the approval of Congress, you fuck, because most of the people who did that were approved by Congress to come back. Fuck you.
Therefore, Congresspersons and United States federal government employees were required for the first time to swear an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That oath was put to test on January 6, 2021. The police officers who held the line
Not even fucking close.
that day honored their oath. Many came out of that day bloodied and broken. They still bear those wounds, visible and invisible. They did their duty. They repelled the mob and ended the occupation of the Capitol. They defended the Constitution against domestic enemies so that Congress could return, uphold our own oath, and count your votes to ensure the transfer of power, just as we've done for hundreds of years. But unlike in 1814, it was domestic enemies of the Constitution who stormed the Capitol and occupied the Capitol, who sought to thwart the will of the people to stop the transfer of power. And so they did, so at the encouragement of the President of the United States.
They did not. You couldn't prove that at the impeachment hearing, which had a lower standard than a criminal conviction. You are a fucking liar. There's no evidence that Donald Trump encouraged any of this, and this talking point will fucking sink you, you piece of human fucking garbage. You garbage people. Again, whatever you think of Trump, he didn't actually encourage this. He couldn't have encouraged this. It was an hour before he even got to the Capitol. His speech wasn't done when this shit started. They're fucking liars.
The President of the United States trying to stop the transfer of power.
He literally was not trying to stop the transfer of power. There was no stoppage of the transfer of power. Nothing happened. And by the way, everyone, every fucking citizen from peasant to president has the right to petition the judicial system for redress of grievances. It's in the fucking Constitution, you goddamn fucking cuck. You lying piece of shit. I fucking hate these people. I hate them. I literally hate all of them, Republican and Democrat alike. I hate all of them, because it's in the Constitution that you get to redress grievances through the government, which means, yes, a president has every right to question an election, every single solitary right, even if you disagree with their bases. They have the right to ask a court to look. They have a right to say, I don't agree. And they have a right to be incorrect about it.
A precedent that had stood for 220 years, even as our democracy had faced its most difficult test.
Oh, fuck
Thinking
off.
back again to the Civil War in the summer of 1864,
You can't think back to the Civil War. You weren't alive, you fucking liar.
the President of the United States believed we would be doomed to bid for re-election. He believed his opponent, General George McClellan, would wave the white flag when it came to preserving the Union.
Would wave the white flag? What, do they have Milo on a pole? What is going on here?
But even with that grim fate hanging in the balance, President Lincoln was ready to accept the will of the voters, come what may. He made a quiet pledge. He wrote down the words, "This morning, as for some days past, it seems exceedingly probable that this administration will not be reelected. Then it will be my duty to so cooperate with the president-elect."
Yeah, the reason that Lincoln might have said that is because Lincoln literally suspended constitutional rights. Lincoln did a whole bunch of shit that was outside of the Constitution, and he did it because he believed in the principle, even though his actions were unlawful. Now, he ended up getting reelected, but Lincoln knew what he was doing. Lincoln, the fucking prosecutor and jailer of journalists, Abraham Lincoln, the presider over the largest mass execution, and by the way, they all happen to be a fucking minority, Abraham Lincoln. That guy knew what he was doing was unacceptable in times of peace, and he only prayed that they would accept his wartime unconstitutional actions in the pursuit of preserving the Union. And frankly, personally, I'm glad he did what he did. And I'm glad he knew what he did was wrong. That's what made Lincoln better than every one of you fucking liars. He knew what he was doing was wrong. You think that you're justified. And that is the distinct and incredibly important difference between Lincoln and every one of you waffle-pussied vaginas on fucking Capitol Hill.
"It will be my duty." Lincoln sealed that memo and asked his cabinet secretaries to sign it sight unseen. He asked them to make the same commitment.
He asked them. Apparently, Benny Thompson was watching Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter and not actual fucking history. Asked, Benny, not axed.
He did, to accept defeat, if indeed defeat was the will of the people, to uphold the rule of law, to do what every president who came before him did, and what every president who followed him would do. Until Donald Trump. Donald Trump lost the presidential election in 2020.
Did he?
The American people voted him out of office.
Again, no matter what you think, let me be very, very clear for YouTube's terms of service. The media admittedly stole it. The media. It's in a Time magazine article, you fucking cuck bitches at YouTube who are going to review this. And I hope you get fisted to death. Fuck you. You're going to review this and be like, well, is he spreading election misinformation? Time magazine, they wrote the article about the collusive efforts of the media to prevent Donald Trump from being elected, not because of anything but their personal animus towards him. Fuck off. Fuck off. The suppression of the Hunter Biden story, which every single thing written about Hunter Biden during the election was true. It was fucking true. It was true. And you cowards suppressed it because you are manipulating an election through the media. Ignore every other criticism about the media. It doesn't matter. What they did during this election was actual sedition. And fuck all of them. And I hope one day the media fear the citizenry in the same way that the government should.
It was not because of a rigged system. It was not because of voter fraud. Don't believe me? Hear what his former attorney general had to say about it.
Yeah, his former attorney general, who hates him and has been a giant fucking piece of garbage ever since. His former attorney general, who turned down the plea agreement of Derek Chauvin. That guy. Where Derek Chauvin could have stopped the summer. By the way, the summer of love, all of that violence that we had during 2020 over Black Lives Matter going after George Floyd could have been stopped immediately if William Barr would have accepted the plea, the guilty plea of Derek Chauvin. And everybody who ever criticizes me for calling Derek Chauvin guilty, 3 days after the death of George Floyd, Derek Chauvin tried to plead guilty to his murder. And William Cockhole Barr rejected it. Like I want to hear what he has to say about January 6th. Fuck him.
I warn those who watching that this contains strong language.
Fuck you.
No, just what I've been through. I had 3 discussions with the president that I can recall. One was on November 23rd, one was on December 1st, and one was on December 14th. And I've been through sort of the give and take of those discussions. And in that context, I made it clear I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was bullshit. And, I didn't want to be a part of it. And that's one of the reasons that went into me deciding to leave when I did. I observed, I think it was on December 1st, that, how can you can't live in a world where the incumbent administration stays in power based on its view, unsupported by specific evidence, that there was fraud in the election.
Bill Barr.
For the purposes of YouTube, since Bill Barr mentioned fraud in the election, I, the streamer, am not making any statements about electoral fraud in any way. And you need to check the reliable media reports about electoral results. The electoral results were tabulated in a constitutional fashion. And no matter what you think about the presidential election of 2020, it was done, and the transfer of power was done according to the Constitution, something that Benny Thompson and this committee will repeatedly lie about over and over and over. But the transfer of power was peaceful and fully in accordance with the Constitution. And to overturn it, you would need an action sanctioned by the Supreme Court or a constitutional amendment, because there is no existing legal process that would overturn the election based on the information that we have. That being said, every single citizen and president and congressman and executive branch officer would be fully within their rights to petition a court to ask them to look for one. And that's the reality we have to face. That's the reality that makes so many people mad about 2020, is that not only was no one able to look, but anyone who dared ask to look was called a traitor to the country, even though what they were trying to do was verify that the most critical process in the country's 4-year cycle was honored. That's all they asked. Please make sure it was done correctly. And they were called literal fucking traitors, seditionists, and treasonists. Why? Why was this propagandized so fucking hard? It never should be. You should always be able to ask that your government is doing government in the right way, even if they 100% are, because they might not be. And if they're not, you're living under tyranny.
On Election Day 2020, he was the Attorney General of the United States,
Shut
the
up.
top law enforcement official in the country,
Fuck
telling
you.
the president exactly what he thought about claims of a stolen election.
No, he's telling someone else what he allegedly, according to him, in a self-serving statement, told the president of the United States on that day. We'll never actually know what he told on that day unless that tape's released. It never will be.
Election. Donald Trump had his days in court to challenge the results. He was within his rights.
He actually never had his days in court to challenge the results. Again, I think Donald Trump was ultimately going to lose all of the court requests. I'm on all sorts of records saying that. YouTube and your fucking third-party Indian showbubs and vagine people who are reviewing this video. By the way, check out my Instagram if you want to see my bobs and vagine. You can do it there, and feet pics are on my OnlyFeets. Whoever's reviewing this, listen very fucking closely. I have been on record from day one saying that the court attempts to overturn the election were futile. They were not going to win, but he gets to ask them. And that does not negate the fact that he never, ever, ever got an actual hearing in court. Never got a hearing. He never got to litigate on the issues. Never. And I think that he would have lost in a similar way to what he lost. Don't get me wrong. Don't misquote me, and don't fucking strike me, because I'm being 100% truthful from a legal perspective. Donald Trump had the highest fucking hill to climb on the planet, and I don't think he was going to make it. But that said, he never got his day in court. Not once did he actually get that day in court. So don't fucking lie about it.
To seek those judgments. In the United States, law-abiding citizens have those tools for pursuing justice.
They actually don't, because you don't have standing as a citizen voter in federal government. Benny fucking gay-ass Thompson, you would know this at all if you had any basis in law to what you're saying, but you don't. Look at this fucking face. Look at this fucking piece of shit sitting here telling you how dumb you are. But Benny Thompson is lying to you. You have no federal standing as a voter or a taxpayer. You could not, because this is how the federal court literally assesses this. This is important. This is critically fucking important. So open your fucking ears right now. If you sue and say, I, as a voter, was disenfranchised by fraud, even if you have all the evidence in the world, I'm not saying anybody did, but hypothetically, if you say, I have all the evidence in the world, I, as a voter, was disenfranchised by fraud, here is what the federal courts will respond to you. You do not have a particularized individual injury because you are not the only person disenfranchised by fraud. In fact, everybody, even the people who benefited from the fraud because their candidate was elected, were similarly affected by the fraud. That is a federal standing analysis. Don't take my word for it. Read it in every lawsuit filed by Lynn Wood, who's a crazy man, by the way. Lynn Wood's a crazy. I don't think that all of his screws are up there. Doesn't matter. You can read the federal standing analysis of every single federal judge who says that you, as an individual voter or taxpayer, do not have standing. You don't have a right to bring this claim because you weren't independently and individually affected by this, which literally means that if the fraud affects everybody positively or negatively, not in the same way, but affects everybody, then there is not an individualized standing argument for it, which is why the Supreme Court refusing Louis Gohmert's constitutional question to them which was joined by Donald Trump, the only person who might have standing, and they didn't even do a standing analysis for Donald Trump. They just dismissed it out of course, was one of the worst Supreme Court decisions of our entire generation. Because if there's only one person who can have standing in an election where there is allegations of fraud, and that is a sitting president or a presidential candidate. That's it. That's the only person. Everybody else has generalized standing, which is not sufficient under federal law. This is basic civil procedure. It's why over and over and over again, I said, Lynn Wood's lawsuits will fail on standing. Go back and check the fucking tape, YouTube, before you strike me. Guys, I can't tell you how much risk I'm taking in just telling you this information and giving you the law on this, even though it is favorable to the narrative, favorable to Benny, the fucking piece of shit Thompson, favorable to Joe Biden, even though it's fully in favor of them. Just telling you how the law works is a risk to the channel. But I'm doing it, and I'm telling you what it is because I told you what it was at the time of the election lawsuits. I said, this lawsuit is probably going to fail due to lack of standing. There is no voter standing. That doesn't exist under federal law because these same fucking reasons.
He lost in the courts, just as he did at the ballot box. And in this country, that's the end of the line. But for Donald Trump, that was only the beginning.
It's actually not the end of the line in this country because you know, Benny Thompson, that Black Lives Matter doesn't respect the decision of courts. Ever. And that public sentiment, the fourth branch of government before the administrative state became the fourth branch. Now the fifth branch of government has always been the citizenry. The citizenry is the final branch of government. Public opinion has always been there.
Beginning of what became a sprawling, multi-step conspiracy aimed at overturning the presidential election, aimed at throwing out the votes of millions of Americans, your votes.
Those votes were already thrown out, you fucker. Now show some evidence for your claims.
Your voice in our democracy and replacing the will of the American people with his will to remain in power after his term ended. Donald Trump was at the center of this conspiracy. And
I guess the same could be said about Al Gore, right, Benny?
Ultimately, Donald Trump, the president of the United States, spurred a mob of domestic enemies of the Constitution to march down the Capitol and subvert American democracy.
Every one of those people, every single one of them would proffer that they were an ally of the Constitution, hoping to ensure that the constitutional, and by the way, a bunch of these people I think they're garbage. Like Baked Alaska, I think that guy's a fucking giant cuck. I think he's a piece of shit. I don't think he has any merit at all. But I don't doubt that Baked Alaska believed he was acting in favor of the Constitution, just like almost everybody else there.
Any legal jargon you hear about seditious conspiracy, obstruction of an official proceeding, conspiracy to
is bullshit.
Fraud the United States boils down to this. January 6th was the culmination of an attempted coup.
It absolutely was not the culmination of an attempted coup. A bunch of unarmed fat fuckers walking into a government building were in no way going to somehow overthrow the U.S. government with zero planning, with zero resources, with zero provisions, and zero bullets. Were they going to overthrow the United States fucking government because in 10 seconds, the National Guard walks through the building and guns every single one of them down? And maybe that would have been the more salacious and better result. But there is no fucking way on earth anybody thought that they were overturning the United States government on January 6, 2020. And this is the dishonesty that will point you to the fucking truth.
An attempt, as one rioter put it shortly after January 6th, to overthrow the government. The violence was no accident. It represented Trump's last
There's no accident because the government let them into the building.
stand, most desperate chance to halt the transfer of power. Now, you may hear those words and think, this is just another political attack on Donald Trump by people who don't like him.
It's not a political attack on Donald Trump. It's a political attack on fucking half the country.
That's not the case. My colleagues and I all wanted an outside independent commission to investigate January 6th, similar to what we had after 9/11. But after first agreeing to the idea, Donald Trump's allies in Congress put a stop to it. Apparently, they don't want January 6th investigated at all.
No, they just realized what you're going to do, which is this. You're going to drag this out through an entire election. You've already dragged it out for a year and 5 months, and you're going to keep dragging it out as long as you think it's politically expedient. You fucking cuck.
And in the last 17 months, many of those same people have tried to whitewash what happened on January 6th, to rewrite history, call it.
What did actually happen? Oh, a bunch of people were let into a White House, and then they were shot and arrested.
A tourist visit.
Sorry, a Capitol building, not a White House. I've had a couple to drink.
Label it legitimate political discourse. Donald Trump and his followers have
How much you want to bet Benny Thompson supports the people standing outside Justice Kavanaugh's house threatening to kill him right now?
adopted the words of the songwriter, "Do you believe me or your lying eyes?" We can't sweep what happened under the rug. The American people deserve answers. So I come before you this evening, not as a Democrat, but as an American who swore an oath to defend the Constitution. The Constitution doesn't protect just Democrats or just Republicans. It protects all of us, we the people.
Oh, does it? Right now, I bet a bunch of Republicans don't feel protected.
And this scheme was an attempt to undermine the will of the people. So tonight, and over the next few weeks, we're going to remind you of the reality of what happened that day. But our work must do much more than just look backwards. The cause of our democracy remains in danger. The conspiracy to thwart the will of the people is not over. There are those in this audience who thirst for power, but have no love or respect for what makes America great.
Literally
Devotion
you.
to the Constitution.
Literally
Allegiance
you.
to the rule of law. Our shared journey to build a more perfect union. January 6th and the lies that led to insurrection have put 2.5 centuries of constitutional democracy at risk.
We don't have a
The world
constitutional
is watching
democracy.
what we do.
We have a democratic republic. A Republican form of government is guaranteed by the Constitution, not a democracy. Democracies are worse than communism. You heard it fucking right. And I'll say it 100 times out of 100. Democracies are worse than communism. Direct democracies lead to the murder of the minor classes. And every single time they are fucking tyrants. They are monsters and they are disgusting. That's why we have a Republican form of government. It's why it's promised and guaranteed in the Constitution multiple times. And it's why motherfuckers like you are flat out evil.
Here, America has long been expected to be a shining city on the hill, a beacon of hope and freedom.
Long been since Ronald Reagan, the man you literally hate, said it? Because Ronald Reagan said that, Benny. Don't co-opt that shit. You hated Ronald Reagan.
A model for others when we are at our best. How can we play that role when our house is in such disorder? We must confront the truth with candor, resolve, and determination. We need to show that we are worthy of the gifts that are the birthright of every American. That begins here, and it begins now, with a true accounting of what happened and what led to the attack on our Constitution and our democracy. In this moment, when the dangers of our Constitution and our democracy loom large, nothing could be more important. Working alongside the public servants on this dais has been one of the greatest honors of my time in Congress. It's been a particular privilege.
Notice there's 0 attractive people on this entire fucking panel.
To count as a partner in this
That's how you know they're all Democrats, including the Republicans.
effort, and to count as a friend, the gentlewoman from Wyoming, Miss Cheney. She's a patriot.
See what I said?
A public servant of profound courage.
See how what he's doing right here? He's jerking off Liz Cheney, the least Republican on the planet. And he's going to drink her cum later. He loves it. He's got his cum catching glasses on. He's going to lick them clean afterwards.
Of devotion to her oath and the Constitution. It's my pleasure to recognize Ms. Cheney for her opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And let me echo those words about the importance of bipartisanship and what a tremendous honor it is.
There's no bipartisanship in this panel. It's Democrats and Democrats who are labeled Republicans. They know it. They know that they have no Republican support. And they know that they're there as tokens. And the best part is they're willing. They're willing. They're the guy in prison who opens his asshole. That's who they are. That's who Cheney is.
To work on this committee. Mr. Chairman, at 6:01 p.m. on January 6th, after he spent hours watching a violent mob besiege, attack, and invade our Capitol, Donald Trump tweeted, but he did not condemn the attack. Instead, he justified it.
He doesn't have to condemn shit. He didn't do anything with it.
These are the things and events that happen, he said, when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from great patriots who've been badly and unfairly treated for so long. As you will see in the hearings to come.
Why don't you read the rest of it, you fucking cunt? Why don't you read the "Go home with love and peace, remember this day forever" that he wrote? Why don't you read that? Why will you not just read the rest of the tweet? It takes you 2 seconds. I just read it. Go home with love and peace. Remember, with love and in peace, remember this day forever. Why don't you read that? Where he was encouraging a peaceful retreat. Why don't you read it?
President Trump believed his supporters at the Capitol, and I quote, "We're doing what they should be doing." This is what he told his staff as they pleaded with him to call off the mob, to instruct his supporters to leave. Over a series of hearings in the coming weeks, you will hear testimony, live and on video, from more than half a dozen former White House staff in the Trump administration, all of whom were in the West Wing of the White House on January 6th. You will hear testimony that, quote, "The president did not really want to put anything out," calling off the riot.
He doesn't have to, by the way. He's not in control of a riot. All of this is predicated on the idea that he was in control of the mob that he was never in control of. You have to first assume that he controlled the mob to then assume that he could tell them to not be what they were, a mob.
Or asking his supporters to leave. You will hear that President Trump was yelling and, quote, "really angry" at advisors who told him he needed to be doing something more. And
good. Like, seriously fucking good. You need to do something more. Why do I have to do something more? I have to do shit. What did he have to do? The man, like, whatever you think, the man believed what happened to him was injustice. Why should he capitulate to injustice? Think about that. Well, imagine, here's the same situation. Literally the same situation. Well, George Floyd should have cheered on Derek Chauvin for kneeling on his neck, right? Because Derek Chauvin was doing the right thing. He was the cop who was arresting a counterfeiter, who was having a fentanyl overdose, and who was having an excited delirium in response to the police showing up, was being uncooperative. Derek Chauvin was holding George Floyd down while the EMTs showed up until they could get the backup that was needed to go ahead and make a proper arrest. George Floyd should have vocally supported Derek Chauvin, and all of his advisors should have told him, you know what, George, you should probably be saying, hey, the police are doing a bang up job here. That would be better for you. Whatever you think about the reality, we don't deal in reality in this stuff. This is perception. Donald Trump had a perception of injustice. Why would he support his perception? He may be wrong. He might be incorrect, and people could say, hey, Mr. President, you're incorrect in this. I'm sorry. If you believe that you are justified and someone comes up and says, oh, I'm sorry, you're wrong. Do you just well, you know what? You said it, so therefore I am wrong. No, you assess whatever they present to you, and then you make a determination.
And aware of the rioters' chance to hang Mike Pence, the president responded.
They had no chance to hang Mike Pence. That's never a thing. It's not even real. Fuck off with that.
Responded with this sentiment, quote, maybe our supporters have the right idea. Mike Pence, quote, deserves it. You will hear evidence that President Trump refused for hours to do what his staff, his family, and many of his other advisors begged him to do. Immediately instruct his supporters to stand down and evacuate the Capitol. Tonight, you will see never-before-seen footage of the brutal attack on our Capitol, an attack that unfolded while a few blocks away, President Trump sat watching television in the dining room next to the Oval Office.
That's right. He should have picked up a katana and gone and murdered all of the attackers.
You will hear audio from the brave police officers battling for their lives and ours, fighting to defend our democracy against a violent mob Donald Trump refused to call off.
He can't call off a violent mob that he's not in control of, you dumb cunny.
Tonight and in the weeks to come, you will see evidence of what motivated this violence, including directly from those who participated in this attack. You will see video of them explaining what caused them to do it. You will see their
What you're going to see, by the way, are videos of them making legal defenses for their actions, suggesting that the president of the United States said I should do this, therefore I should be absolved of legal responsibility for it. That's not an actual admission, by the way. That's them saying I should be absolved of responsibility because someone else did it. That's a great defense, and everybody should use it. In fact, if you get charged with a crime, go ahead and throw out the defense that Benny Thompson told you that this wasn't a criminal act. I don't care if it's a rape. It doesn't matter. Benny Thompson told you, right? He did it. You throw out whatever you can.
posts on social media. We will show you what they have said in federal court. On this point, there is no room for debate. Those who invaded our Capitol and battled law enforcement for hours were motivated by what President Trump had told them, that the election was stolen and that he was the rightful president. President Trump.
To Team YouTube, just so you know, Miss Cheney is speaking about a narrative that existed at the time that is not the present position of this channel or anyone else. I'm providing a proper disclaimer. Please do not strike me, you fucking faggots, you fucking piles of garbage faggot strikers who are out there who think that any mention of voter fraud automatically means that someone endorses it. You fucking dumb faggot third world pieces of shit that were hired by YouTube. Fuck all of you and your fucking faggot ways. I hope you catch fire and die in a wife burning. Fuck you.
Summoned the mob, assembled the mob, and lit the flame of this.
He literally couldn't have done that. The mob was still at his speech, which happened when the mob started attacking.
Attack. You will also hear about plots to commit seditious conspiracy on January 6th, a crime defined in our laws as conspiring to overthrow, put down, or destroy by force the government of the United States, or to oppose by force the authority thereof. Multiple members of two groups, the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, have been charged.
Bunch of fucking faggots there too.
With this crime for their involvement in the events leading up to and on January 6th. Some have pled guilty. The attack on our Capitol was not a spontaneous riot. Intelligence available before January 6th identified plans to, quote, invade the Capitol, occupy the Capitol, and take other steps to halt Congress's count of electoral votes.
And notice none of what they planned actually occurred in any way.
That day. In our hearings to come, we will identify elements of those plans, and we will show specifically how a group of Proud Boys led a mob into the Capitol building on January 6th.
Did they start punching them and asking them to name 10 cereals and then telling them they can't masturbate ever again in their lives? Because that's the fucking Proud Boys. They're a bunch of weirdos. They're like, name 10 breakfast cereals. Stop masturbating.
6th. Tonight, I'm going to describe for you.
Gavin McInnes, Proud Boy in Chief, shoved a dildo in his ass to own people like you, Cheney. He was on live TV and he put a dildo into his ass to show that you were fucking stupid. That's how weird the Proud Boys are. They don't count.
For you some of what our committee has learned and highlight initial findings you will see this month in our hearings. As you hear this, all Americans should keep in mind this fact. On the morning of January 6th, President Donald Trump's intention was to remain president of the United States, despite the lawful outcome.
Yes, it was, because he didn't think the outcome was lawful, you dumb bitch.
Of the 2020 election, and in violation of his constitutional obligation to relinquish power.
He didn't have a constitutional obligation to relinquish power at the start of the day on January 6th, you dumb bitch, because the electoral votes had not been counted and there was still a chance that Mike Pence might not count them in the way that he ended up counting them. And there was still a pending Supreme Court case from fucking Louis Gohmert at the time, you dumb bitch. Again, you can hate, you can say Donald Trump was wrong all day. You can say the insurrectionists were entirely incorrect. But at the morning of January 6th, every legal claim and political claim was still on the table and would be not only on January 6th, but for the next 13 days until inauguration. Because only when Biden was inaugurated did the presidential power change and his right and Donald Trump's right to assert a claim of a cause of action against anyone else expire, because that is the moment where the constitutional question of who is president is answered. It is upon inauguration. It's written down in the fucking text that is when constitutional power shifts from one executive to another, is upon inauguration. Prior to that, everything is on the table up until the moment the oath is taken and the new president is sworn in.
Over multiple months, Donald Trump oversaw and coordinated a sophisticated 7-part plan to overturn the presidential election and prevent the transfer of presidential power. In our hearings,
you get to have every single part of that plan until Inauguration Day, you bitch.
will see evidence of each element of this plan. In our second hearing, you will see that Donald Trump and his advisors knew that he had in fact lost the election. But despite this, President Trump engaged in a massive effort to spread false and fraudulent information to convince huge portions of the US population that fraud had stolen the election from him. This was not true. Jason Miller was a senior Trump campaign spokesman. In this clip, Miller describes a call between the Trump campaign's internal data expert and President Trump a few days after the 2020 election.
I was in the Oval Office, and at some point in the conversation, Maddox
wearing a mask inside a closed room by himself. Clearly, this guy, this is a full-on Republican right here. This is a freedom-loving American. Have you ever seen one who is less freedom-loving than Jason Miller? Everybody is less freedom-loving than Jason Miller.
Kowski, who is the lead data person, was brought on, and I remember he delivered to the president pretty blunt terms that he was going to lose.
And that was based, Mr. Miller, on MAD and the data team's assessment of the sort of county by county, state by state results as reported?
Correct.
Alex Cannon was one of President Trump's campaign lawyers. He previously worked for the Trump Organization. One of his responsibilities was to assess allegations of election fraud in November 2020. Here is one sample of his testimony discussing what he told White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows.
Mark Meadows is a giant vagina, by the way.
I remember a call.
Do you remember summer? It lasted so long until you cuckolded all the time. You watch your wife get railed. I don't know. That song got weird.
With Mr. Meadows, where Mr. Meadows was asking me what I was finding and if I was finding anything. And I remember sharing with him that we weren't finding anything that would be sufficient to change the results in any of the key states.
When was that conversation?
Probably in November, mid to late November. I think it was before my child was born.
And what was Mr. Meadows' reaction to that information?
I believe the words he used were, "So there's no there there."
There's no there there. The Trump campaign's general counsel, Matt Morgan, gave similar testimony. He explained that all of the fraud allegations and the campaign's other election arguments taken together and viewed in the best possible light for President Trump could still not change the outcome of the election. President Trump's Attorney General.
By the way, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but opinions of lawyers aren't reality. They're opinions of lawyers. And while those opinions have been quote unquote vindicated now, that doesn't mean that those were the correct or valid opinions at the time, or that they should even reasonably be listened to. This is the insane part of this. There's nothing about these opinions that necessitate the outcome that we have.
Bill Barr also told Donald Trump his.
By the way, I can make tons of opinions. And again, full disclosure, go check the tapes if you want. My opinions were that Donald Trump would lose all of these lawsuits. The only one I thought asked there were two I thought asked interesting questions. One was coming through Pennsylvania state courts, which got shut down entirely. And the other one was Louis Gohmert's lawsuit, which also got shut down entirely. And I will maintain that those were interesting legal questions. I didn't know at the time if they would be sufficient to overturn the election, but they were certainly interesting legal questions. They got shut out completely, again, without even a hearing on the merits or anything like that. And the Supreme Court decision, you can go watch my video about John Roberts being a coward. The Supreme Court decision on the Louis Gohmert case in particular is entirely flawed because the Supreme Court took a political position rather than a legal one on that case. But it doesn't matter what an individual lawyer says, because in almost all cases, there are two lawyers, and one of them says the opposite of the other. And so you're listening to a person who literally held the position that there was really no legal avenue for Donald Trump to win. But I'm just me. And there are a bunch of other lawyers who know more, who have researched more, who have more experience, who may even be smarter than me, who disagreed. Like Jenna Ellis, for example, disagreed, thought there might be a path to victory. Rudy Giuliani disagreed, thought there might be a path to victory. Actually, several unnamed lawyers, because their careers would be destroyed, also disagreed, thought there were paths to victory. A lawyer saying, oh, well, Mr. Trump, you didn't win this one. We don't have the data to support it. That's one asshole's opinion in a sea of assholes.
Election claims were wrong.
Repeatedly told the president in no uncertain terms that I did not see evidence of fraud, and that would have affected the outcome of the election. And frankly, a year and a half later, I haven't seen anything to change my mind on that.
Attorney General Barr also told President Trump that his allegations about Dominion voting machines were groundless.
Again, so
I saw absolutely zero basis for the allegations, but they were made in such a sensational way that they obviously were influencing a lot of people, members of the public, that there was this systemic corruption in the system and that their votes didn't count and that these machines controlled by somebody else were actually determining it, which was complete nonsense. And it was being laid out there. And I told them that it was crazy stuff and they were wasting their time on that. And it was doing a grave disservice to the country.
But President Trump persisted, repeating the false Dominion allegations in public at least a dozen more times, even after his attorney general told him they were, quote, complete nonsense. And after
Bill Barr refused to accept the guilty plea of Derek Chauvin, the man isn't batting 1,000 on legal opinions. In fact, there are plenty of opinions of Bill Barr that all of these people, including Liz Cheney, would fully disagree with in any other context.
Barr's resignation on December 23rd, the acting attorney general who replaced him, Jeff Rosen, and the acting deputy.
Jeff Rosen's a giant cuck too.
Richard Donahue told President Trump over and over again that the evidence did not support allegations he was making in public. Many of President Trump's White House staff also recognized that the evidence did not support the claims President Trump was making.
Max Hines says Trump lost fair and square. Fine. Again, first of all, I don't think it was entirely fair because the media literally suppressed stories that would be favorable to Trump and amplified stories that were negative towards Trump, and that's admitted to in a Time magazine article. And the literal conspiracy behind that is amazing. It's all in the open. You can go read about it. But that being said, even taking your super chat is true. None of that matters to what's going on in this hearing. This hearing is not about whether or not Trump lost. They want it to be about that. The hearing is about whether or not the people who participated in the January 6th protest, riot, insurrection, whatever you want to call it, one, if they're linked to Donald Trump, which they're not, and two, if they're guilty of sedition prior to their trials, by the way. Notice what they're doing, trying to influence public opinion and maybe even judges prior to the trials of many of these people. If they're guilty of sedition, that's the argument they're making on Capitol Hill. And it is disgusting that they're doing this. If you did this, by the way, if you did this, if you made some push towards judges and juries about the guilt or innocence of the Capitol rioters, with the weight and effect of a congressional hearing, if you could somehow do that, I don't know how that translates, but if you could do it, it would be a criminal act. Think about that.
This is the president's daughter commenting on Bill Barr's statement that the department found no fraud sufficient to overturn the election.
How did that affect your perspective about the election when Attorney General Barr made that statement?
It affected my perspective. I respect Attorney General Barr. So I accepted what he was saying.
As you will hear on Monday, the president had every right to litigate his campaign claims, but he ultimately lost more than 60 cases in state and federal courts.
Not a single one was heard on the merits. They were all dismissed pre-trial. Every single one of them, without a meritorious hearing on any of them.
President's claims in the election cases.
And again, I think he would have lost all of them if heard on the merits, which is why the court should have obviously fucking heard them on the merits for the health of the country instead of dismissing them pre-trial like a bunch of fucking morons.
Were so frivolous and unsupported that the president's lead lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, not only lost the lawsuits, his license to practice law was suspended. Here's what the court said.
Yeah, again, bar associations and lawyer professional responsibility boards are complete political animals. And I have zero respect for Rudy Giuliani. I think that his oral argument at the only hearing that he gave was one of the most embarrassing oral arguments. Again, I'm on record with all of this. Go listen to my dissection of his piss poor oral argument all you want. He didn't argue any of the relevant factors. He went with all of the irrelevant shit, and it was stupid of him to do so. That said, just because he got disbarred doesn't mean the disbarment was correct.
Of Mr. Giuliani. Giuliani communicated demonstrably false and misleading statements to courts, lawmakers, and the public at large in his capacity as lawyer for former President Donald J. Trump.
Shouldn't Elaine Bredehoft be disciplined for doing the same thing? Why won't she? She'll never be. Lawyers do this. They make demonstrably false and misleading statements to courts. Well, lawyers never do that. Lawmakers and the public at large, in their capacity as lawyers, they do it all the time. All the time.
And the Trump campaign in connection with Trump's failed effort at re-election in 2020. As you will see in great detail in our hearings, President Trump ignored the rulings of our nation's courts. He ignored his own campaign leadership, his White House staff, many Republican state officials. He ignored the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security. President Trump invested millions of dollars of campaign funds purposely spreading false information, running ads he knew were false, and convincing millions of Americans that the election was corrupt and that he was the true president. As you will see, this misinformation campaign provoked the violence on January 6th. In our third hearing, you will see that President Trump corruptly planned to replace the Attorney General of the United States so the U.S. Justice Department would spread his false stolen election claims.
He had an insubordinate employee, and he chose to replace him with one who he believed would be subordinate.
In the days before January 6th,
every one of them
President Trump told his top Justice Department officials, quote, "Just say the election was corrupt and leave the rest to me and the Republican congressman." Senior Justice Department officials, men he had appointed, told him they could not do that because it was not true. So President Trump decided to replace them.
Good. That's literally his job and their job.
He offered Jeff Clark, an environmental lawyer at the Justice Department, the job of acting Attorney General. President Trump wanted Mr. Clark to take a number of steps, including sending this letter to Georgia and 5 other states, saying the U.S. Department of Justice had, quote, identified significant concerns that may have impacted the outcome of the election. This letter is a lie. The Department of Justice
It's not.
had, in fact, repeatedly told President Trump exactly the opposite.
Except that the Department of Justice lawyers on the Georgia phone call said something different. So it clearly wasn't. Now, maybe the Department of Justice wasn't homogenous in its opinions. And maybe even the Attorney General of the United States didn't agree with them. That does not mean that the Department of Justice itself had not identified causes for concern that were explicitly mentioned on those phone calls. And all they asked for from Georgia was the raw data that Georgia had to compare with their own raw data, which seemed to indicate a discrepancy, was refused to be provided by Georgia. And all of this could have been prevented if Georgia would have just provided them with the voter data that Georgia had that they could compare it to. But they didn't. Why? Why didn't they?
That they had investigated his stolen election allegations and found no credible fraud that could impact the outcome of the election.
Georgia said that, and Donald Trump's lawyers specifically said, well, we have some discrepancies in the numbers. All we're asking is for you to explain them to us. And they said, no, we won't.
This letter and others like it would have urged multiple states to withdraw their official and lawful electoral votes for Biden.
Which he's fully entitled to do, whether the states do it or not. He could ask them for anything.
Acting Deputy Attorney General Richard Donahue described Jeff Clark's letter this way, quote, "This would be a grave step for the department to take and could have tremendous constitutional, political, and social ramifications."
Name a single constitutional ramification, which is the only one of those that matter.
For this country.
Name one.
The committee
Name
agrees
one.
with Mr.
Cite
Donahue's
the Constitution
assessment.
that says the president
Clark
can't
assumed the role
order
of
the
Attorney
Department of
General
Justice
in the days before
to,
January 6th and
to
issued these
request them
letters.
to
The ramifications
review
could
their
indeed have been grave.
endorsement.
Mr. Donahue
Name it.
also said this about Clark's plan.
And I recall toward the end saying, what you're proposing is nothing less than the United States Justice Department meddling in the outcome of a presidential election.
The same thing that Al Gore and several other presidents throughout history, and including a bunch of Congress people, have advocated for. There is a point in which the DOJ or anyone else can, quote unquote, meddle in the outcome of an election if they believe that the election is based on fraud. And again, Whether you agree or disagree with the allegations of fraud is irrelevant to the question. That's like saying, I don't agree that someone stole anything. Therefore, no one should ever be able to question whether or not something was stolen from them through the courts. Of course, you can ask a court, you can say, hey, I think this person stole my bike. Here's a serial number. Let's prove it out. And they can say, this isn't your bike. It's just one that looks like it. We both shop at Walmart. And they can win. You still had the right to think that that person stole your bike. That's just so fucking frustrating.
In our hearings, you will hear firsthand how the senior leadership of the Department of Justice threatened to resign, how the White House counsel threatened to resign, and how they confronted Donald Trump and Jeff Clark in the Oval Office. The men involved, including Acting Attorney General Jeff Rosen and Acting Deputy Attorney General Richard Donahue, were appointed by President Trump. These men honored their oaths of office, they did their duty, and you will hear from them in our hearings. By contrast, Jeff Clark has invoked his Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination and refused to testify. Representative Scott Perry.
Gee, why? Because this is a political prosecution, a political hearing entirely aimed at creating a perjury trap for people? Is that why? Maybe. I don't know.
Who is also involved in trying to get Clark appointed as Attorney General, has refused to testify here. As you will see, Representative Perry contacted the White House in the weeks after January 6th to seek a presidential pardon. Multiple other Republican congressmen also sought presidential pardons for their roles in attempting to overturn the 2020 election. In our fourth hearing, we will focus on President Trump's efforts to pressure Vice President Mike Pence to refuse to count electoral votes on January 6th. Vice President Pence has spoken publicly about this.
President Trump is wrong. I had no right to overturn the election.
Actually, that is a legal question that is still open. Mike Pence is offering a legal opinion on this. And by the way, I happen to agree with Mike Pence that he doesn't have the legal power to overturn the election. However, both me and Mike Pence could be wrong, and Donald Trump gets to ask the fucking question.
The presidency belongs to the American people and the American people alone. And frankly,
except the American people don't have standing to sue over the presidency that they apparently own, so that's not actually true.
there is no idea more un-American than the notion that any one person could choose the American president.
What President Trump demanded that Mike Pence do wasn't just wrong.
Mike Pence, in effect, did choose the American president in that point as one person. Make no mistake. I mean, what he's saying is hypocritical. It's so fucking irritating.
It was illegal, and it was
not illegal.
Unconstitutional.
It was not unconstitutional. Automatically, no court has ever ruled that the president's request is unconstitutional. And we know from Marbury versus Madison that the courts say what the law is. This is a lie.
You will hear this in great detail from the Vice President's former general counsel. Witnesses in these hearings will explain how the former Vice President and his staff informed President Trump over and over again that what he was pressuring Mike Pence to do was illegal.
It's not illegal. There is no law saying that Donald Trump cannot suggest to the Vice President of the United States to not read the electoral votes. In fact, again, there's a credible legal argument crafted by lawyers with much more knowledge and experience than me that suggests that maybe the Vice President's read of those votes is the operative act of naming a president. I disagree, by the way, but it's not a resolved question, and we can't pretend that it is just for political expedience or for legal agreement. I disagree with a lot of things that happen in law all the time. I fucking hate this.
As you will hear, President Trump engaged.
By the way, I really legitimately hate defending things that I disagree with on the principle that the question gets to be asked because I disagree with the question and I disagree with the assumed answers. But it's my fucking job. It's my job to do this. In the same way that if I were a criminal defense attorney, which I occasionally am, it is my job to assert the innocence of my client, even if I think that there might be enough evidence to convict them. That's what lawyers have to do. And you can know this. You can find, again, all of my statements on this are all public record. I will not be dishonest with you. But I think it bolsters my credibility that I think these are oppositional arguments to my position, but they should be made. They have the right to make the arguments. And this committee is trying to insinuate that they never had the right, which is nonsense. You should have the right, just like anybody else in the United States.
In a relentless effort to pressure Pence, both in private and in public. You will see the evidence of that pressure from multiple witnesses, live and on video. Vice President Pence demonstrated his loyalty to Donald Trump consistently over 4 years, but he knew that he had a higher duty to the United States Constitution. This is testimony from the Vice President's Chief of Staff.
So I think the vice president was proud of his 4 years of service, and he felt like much had been accomplished in those 4 years.
Mike Pence is a political animal that had aims on the 2024 election and still does. I think he miscalculated, but I think pretty obviously Mike Pence thought that he could pose himself as a reasonable alternative when Donald Trump was no longer electable.
And I think he was proud to have stood beside the president for all that had been done. But I think he ultimately knew that his fidelity to the Constitution was his first and foremost oath. And
they're praising Mike Pence, by the way. Days before that inauguration, they were roasting him alive for his statements in Georgia, which suggested that Mike Pence was considering the possibility of doing what Donald Trump asked when he spoke in support of Donald Trump in Georgia, a mere, I think, 3 days prior to the electoral vote count. I think it was 3 days prior to January 6th, where Mike Pence was making those sort of discussions. I don't know. Maybe the chat will fact check me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's what was going on.
And that's what he articulated publicly, and I think that that's what he felt.
His fidelity to the Constitution was more important than his fidelity to President Trump and his desire.
The oath he took. Yep.
Yes.
You'll also hear about a lawyer named John Eastman. Mr. Eastman was deeply involved in President Trump's plans. You'll hear from former Fourth Circuit federal judge Michael Ludig, a highly respected leading conservative judge. John Eastman clerked for Judge Ludig. Judge Ludig provided counsel to the vice president's team in the days before January 6th. The judge will explain how Eastman, quote, was wrong at every turn. And you will see.
Again, lawyers disagreeing is not a weird thing, except when it's politically expedient for that to happen.
The email exchanges between Eastman and the vice president's counsel as the violent attack on Congress was underway. Mr. Jacob said this to Mr. Eastman: "Thanks to your bullshit, we are under siege." You will also see evidence that John Eastman did not actually believe the legal position he was taking. In fact, a month before the 2020 election, Eastman took exactly the opposite view on the same legal issues. In the course of the—
By the way, the lawyer who successfully argued that that Obamacare was not an exercise of the Commerce Clause, but was in fact a reasonable exercise of the taxing and spending power, didn't believe his position either. And that's the position that won at the Supreme Court.
The Select Committee's work to obtain information from Mr. Eastman, we have had occasion to present evidence to a federal judge. The judge evaluated the facts, and he reached the conclusion that President Trump's efforts to pressure Vice President Pence to act illegally by refusing to count electoral votes likely violated 2 federal criminal statutes.
And yet you haven't impeached him for it, and you haven't prosecuted him for it, and you won't, and you'll lose if you do.
And the judge also said this: if Dr. Eastman and President Trump's plan had worked, it would have permanently ended the peaceful transition of power, undermining American democracy and the Constitution. If the country does not commit to investigating and pursuing
Did he say the same thing about Al Gore?
accountability for those responsible, the court fears January 6th will repeat itself. Every American should read what this federal judge has written. The same judge, Judge Carter, issued another decision on Tuesday night, just this week, indicating that John Eastman and other Trump lawyers knew that their legal arguments had no real chance of success in court, but they relied on those arguments anyway to try to, quote, overturn a Democratic election. And you will hear that while Congress was under attack on January 6th and the hours following the violence, the Trump legal team in the Willard Hotel War Room continued to work to halt the count of electoral votes. In our 5th hearing, you will see evidence that President Trump corruptly pressured state legislators and election officials to change election results. You will hear additional details about President Trump's call to Georgia officials, urging them to, quote, find 11,780 votes, votes that did not exist.
That is not fucking true. And again, if you're gonna run one of these fucking witch hunts, at least factually state what happened correctly. Trump said our data shows many more votes. Again, they were begging Georgia to share the data with them. They said, our data shows many more votes for me. All I need is this many to overturn it. So let's find whatever that amount is. But their data that they have, that Georgia never refuted or even considered, suggested a different outcome than what Georgia had. So again, Trump may have been wrong. Georgia had the opportunity to correct it and did not do it. And instead, they took that quote out of its context to try and use against Trump. But it is not true. It is not a true assessment of what he was asking.
And his efforts to get state.
Brian Moe, fuck you, you dumb faggot. What was said on that phone call is plainly apparent to anyone who speaks fucking English. I don't know what dumb language you speak, but go back to sucking your own asshole, you idiot. Go listen to the fucking language on the phone call. He does not ask for what she says he asked and does not ask for what's in the media. Go listen to it. Any dumbass can understand it, which would include you.
States to rescind certified electoral slates without factual basis and contrary to law. You will hear new details about the Trump campaign and other Trump associates' efforts to instruct Republican officials in multiple states to create intentionally false electoral slates and transmit those slates to Congress, to the Vice President, and the National Archives, falsely certifying that Trump won states he actually lost. In our final 2 June hearings, you will hear how President Trump summoned a violent mob and directed them illegally to march on the.
Brian Moe says any dumbass would see it was a coup that failed by Trump. I agree. Only dumbasses would see that it was a coup that failed by Trump. Correct. Your statement is correct, and I'm glad that you see it that way, you fucking dumbass.
United States Capitol. While the violence was underway, President Trump failed to take immediate action to stop the violence and instruct his supporters to leave the Capitol. As we present these initial findings, keep 2 points in mind. First, our investigation is still ongoing, so what we make public here will not be the complete set of information we will ultimately disclose. And second, the Department of Justice.
Your investigation is ongoing. Then why are you releasing the information from the investigation at this time? What could possibly be going on? Ukraine, COVID's ending, monkeypox, gas prices, shit economy. What's happening? Oh, yeah, it's June. And you need to rehabilitate the Democratic platform by fucking November. Even though your investigation is ongoing, this investigation will be going on till sometime in 2024, by the way.
Justice is currently working with cooperating witnesses and has disclosed to date only some of the information it has identified from encrypted communications and other sources. On December 18th, 2020, a group including General Michael Flynn, Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani, and others visited the White House. They stayed late into the evening. We know that the group discussed a number of dramatic steps, including having the military seize voting machines and potentially rerun elections. You will also hear that President Trump met with that group alone for a period of time before White House lawyers and other staff discovered the group was there and rushed to intervene.
Oh, no.
A little more than an hour after Ms. Powell, Mr. Giuliani, General Flynn, and the others finally left the White House, President Trump sent the tweet on the screen now, telling people to come to Washington on January 6th. Be there, he instructed them. Will be wild. As you will see, this was a pivotal moment. This tweet initiated a chain of events. The tweet led to the planning for what occurred on January 6th, including by the Proud Boys, who ultimately led the invasion of the Capitol and the violence on that day. The indictment of a group of
Proud Boys
alleges that they planned, quote, to oppose by force the authority of the government of the United States. And according to the Department of Justice,
I don't even like the Proud Boys, but again, there's all sorts of documented history throughout the United States, specific to the United States history, that suggests that a tyrannical government should be opposed with force. I don't agree with the Proud Boys or endorse violent actions. I don't believe in political violence, but it's not like this is a new concept. I don't know if I'm going to finish this because I'm getting fucking irritated.
Justice. On January 6, 2021, the defendants directed, mobilized, and led members of the crowd onto the Capitol grounds and into the Capitol, leading to the dismantling of metal barricades, the destruction of property, the breaching of the Capitol building, and the assaults on law enforcement. Although certain former Trump officials have argued that they did not anticipate violence on January 6th, the evidence suggests otherwise. As you will see in our hearings, the White House was receiving specific reports in the days leading up to January 6th, including during President Trump's Ellipse rally, indicating that elements in the crowd were preparing for violence at the Capitol. And on the evening of January 5th, the president's close advisor, Steve Bannon, said this on his podcast.
All hell is going to break loose tomorrow. Just understand this. All hell is going to break loose tomorrow.
As part of our investigation, we will...
Again, being... pointing out that there are a bunch of people who are angry and saying, look, tomorrow, fuck, I mean, shit's going to go down, doesn't mean that you're planning for shit to go down.
Present information about what the White House and other intelligence agencies knew and why the Capitol was not better prepared. But we will not lose sight of the fact that the Capitol Police did not cause the crowd to attack. And we will not blame the violence that day, violence provoked by Donald Trump, on the officers who bravely defended all of us. In our final hearing, you will hear a moment-by-moment.
I know other people have said this, and they're 100% right. They're trying to relitigate the impeachment. That's what they're trying to do because they fucking lost. They lost the impeachment. They obviously lost the impeachment. They didn't even have a scintilla of evidence for the impeachment of Donald Trump. They're trying to do it now when there's no jury. And if that's not obvious, I don't know what is.
Account of the hours-long attack from more than half a dozen White House staff, both live in the hearing room and via videotape.
More than 6? Oh my goodness. What will we do with more than 6 people?
Testimony.
Is it 7?
There's no doubt that President Trump was well aware of the violence as it developed. White House staff urged President Trump to intervene and call off the mob. Here is a document written while the attack was underway by a member of the White House staff advising what the president needed to say. Quote, anyone who entered the Capitol without proper authority should leave immediately. This is exactly what his supporters on Capitol Hill and nationwide were urging the president to do. He would not. You will hear that leaders on Capitol Hill begged the president for help, including Republican leader McCarthy, who was, quote, scared, and called multiple members of President Trump's family.
Republican leader McCarthy had access to Nancy Pelosi as well as Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell, who would have had full authority over the Capitol Police, could have invoked the Capitol Police to appear. And by the way, the transfer of the DC unit of the power, the authority over the DC National Guard was transferred from Donald Trump to local command several days prior so that they could properly assess and address potential violence. All of that was done prior. Donald Trump had washed his hands of it, and it was in the command power of other people who were present and allegedly cowering in fear when they had the authority to call in reinforcements, but didn't. Why didn't they?
After he could not persuade the president himself. Not only did President Trump refuse to tell the mob to leave the Capitol, he placed no call to any element of the United States government to instruct that the Capitol be defended.
He had already turned over authority to local command and I believe the DC mayor to do that. He had already said, here you go. Here is the full authority to do this.
He did not call his Secretary of Defense on January 6th. He did not talk.
SecDef would have no authority over the National Guard at that time.
Talk to his Attorney General.
The Attorney General would have no authority over the National Guard or the Capitol Police. Neither the Secretary of Defense nor the Attorney General could deploy the National Guard or the Capitol Police on January 6th, no matter what Trump talked to them about or didn't talk to them about. In fact, the Capitol Police Sergeant at Arms was directly in contact with the leaders of the House and the Senate, Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell, as well, and the National Guard was directly under the control, I believe, of the DC mayor and the local general in charge of the National Guard. None of them are the Secretary of Defense, the Attorney General, who, why would the Attorney General have any authority over any of these people? They may have some ability to call in like an FBI agent, but that's not how the FBI works. And Donald Trump himself did not have authority over either of those law enforcement entities at the time. This is just a fucking lie. And again, it's a pointless lie because you could just round it out with the truth and say that Donald Trump delegated his authority to other people to absolve himself of responsibility on January 6th. He was trying to, you could make that argument, but they don't. Instead, they just lie.
He did not talk to the Department of Homeland Security.
DHS would have no authority over what was going on because they don't deploy the National Guard and they have no authority over the Capitol Police. DHS cannot just deploy armed forces within the borders of the United States to respond to an uprising at the Capitol building.
President Trump gave no order to deploy the National Guard that day, and he made no effort to work with the Department of Justice to coordinate and deploy law enforcement assets.
What law enforcement assets could be deployed? Explain, Liz Cheney. You seem to know what law enforcement assets could be deployed by the president by talking to the head of the Department of Justice. Literally none. None of them.
But Vice President Pence did each of those things.
And what happened?
For example, here is what General Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, testified to this committee.
There were 2 or 3 calls with Vice President Pence. He was very animated, and he issued very explicit, very direct, unambiguous orders. There was no question about that. And he was, and I can get you the exact quotes, I guess, from some of our records somewhere, but he was very animated, very direct, very firm, and to Secretary Miller. Get the military down here, get the Guard down here, put down this situation, etc.
Why didn't you?
By contrast, here is General Milley's description of his conversation.
Oh, because you couldn't.
With President Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, on January 6th.
He said, we have to kill the narrative that the vice president is making all the decisions. We need to establish the narrative that that the president is still in charge and that things are steady or stable or what's that thing. I immediately interpret that as politics, politics, politics. Red flag for me personally, no action, but I remember it distinctly.
And you will hear from witnesses how the day played out inside the White House, how multiple White House staff resigned in disgust, and how President Trump would not ask his supporters to leave the Capitol. It was only after multiple hours of violence that President Trump finally released a video instructing the riotous mob to leave. And as he did so, he said to them, quote, "We love you, and you're very special." You will also hear,
gee, if only there were any evidence of any other public officials saying we love you and you're special to any other political groups that have gotten violent ever. Oh my God.
that in the immediate aftermath of January 6th,
anywhere.
members of the president's family, White House staff, and others tried to step in to stabilize the situation, quote, to land the plane before the presidential transition on January 20th. You will hear about members of the Trump cabinet discussing the possibility of invoking the 25th Amendment and replacing the President of the United States. Multiple members of President Trump's own cabinet resigned immediately after January 6th. One member of the cabinet suggested that the remaining cabinet officers needed to take a more active role in running the White House and the administration. But most emblematic of those days is this exchange of texts between Sean Hannity and former President Trump's press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany.
You're fucking kidding me, right?
Sean Hannity wrote, in part, "Key now, no more crazy people, no more stolen election talk. Yes, impeachment and 25th Amendment are real. Many people will quit." Ms. McEnany responded in part, "Love that. That's the playbook." The White House staff knew that President Trump was willing to entertain and use conspiracy theories to achieve his ends. They knew the president needed to be cut off from all of those who had
world-renowned lawyer and political strategist Sean fucking Hannity. He's now they're now all of these people hate Sean Hannity. They hate him, but he's politically expedient here. You're a great American, Liz Cheney.
had encouraged him. They knew that President Donald Trump was too dangerous to be left alone, at least until he left office on January 20th. These are important facts for Congress and the American people to understand fully. When a president fails to take the steps necessary to preserve our union, or worse, causes a constitutional crisis, we're at a moment of maximum danger for our republic. Some in the White House took responsible steps to try to prevent January 6th. Others egged the president on. Others, who could have acted, refused to do so. In this case, the White House counsel was so concerned about potentially lawless activity that he threatened to resign multiple times. That is exceedingly rare and exceedingly serious. It requires immediate attention, especially when the entire team threatens to resign. However, in the Trump White House, it was not exceedingly rare, and it was not treated seriously. This is a clip of Jared Kushner addressing multiple threats by White House counsel Pat Cipollone and his team of lawyers to resign in the weeks before January 6th.
Resign.
Jared, are you aware of instances where Pat Cipollone threatened to resign?
I kind of, like I said, my interest at that time was on trying to get as many pardons done. And I know that, he was always, him and the team were always saying, oh, we're going to resign. We're not going to be here if this happens, if that happens. So I kind of took it up to just be whining, to be honest with you.
Yeah, exactly.
Whining.
Literally, yes.
There's a reason why people serving in our government take an oath to the Constitution.
As
our founding fathers recognized, democracy is fragile. People in positions of public trust are duty-bound to defend it, to step forward when action is required.
Oh, are they?
In our country, we don't swear an oath to an individual or a political party. We take our oath to defend the United States Constitution.
And none of you
that
take it
oath
seriously.
Must mean something. Tonight, I say this to my Republican colleagues who are defending the indefensible. There will come a day when Donald Trump is gone, but your dishonor will remain. Finally,
What a line,
I ask
fucking
all of our
cunt.
fellow Americans, as you watch our hearings over the coming weeks, please remember
What
what's
a
at stake.
cunt.
Remember the men and women who have fought and died so that we can live under the rule of law, not the rule of men. I ask you to think of the scene in our Capitol Rotunda on the night of January 6th. There, in a sacred space in our constitutional republic, the place where our presidents lie in state, watched over by statues of Washington and Jefferson, Lincoln and Grant, Eisenhower, Ford, and Reagan. Against every wall that night encircling the room, there were SWAT teams, men and women in tactical gear with long guns, deployed inside our Capitol building.
And we were concerned about a bunch of unarmed citizens walking in and somehow taking over the government from the people with guns and running the entire show somehow.
There in the rotunda, these brave men and women rested beneath paintings depicting the earliest scenes of our republic, including one painted in 1824 depicting George Washington resigning his commission, voluntarily relinquishing power, handing control of the Continental Army back to Congress. With this noble act, Washington set the indispensable example of the peaceful transfer of power.
Some would say it was a quote unquote noble but self-serving and entirely selfish act that George Washington did because he did not want to be president, but rather to enjoy the massive amounts of wealth he had accumulated as general of the Continental Army. I mean, again, it depends on your opinion of George Washington, but it's not like this man was a walking fucking saint and that everything he did was fully in support of the Union itself.
What President Reagan called nothing less than a miracle. The sacred obligation to defend this peaceful transfer of power has been honored by every American president, except one. As Americans, we all have a duty to ensure that what happened on January 6th never happens again, to set aside partisan battles, to stand together to perpetuate and preserve our great republic. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
As we provide answers to American people.
Yes, and to all the people in the chat saying FDR didn't. He didn't give a shit what George Washington said at all. He was happy to be elected 4 times. He was happy to be elected 4 times, despite Washington's noble arrangement. So many times that Congress had to pass a constitutional amendment to stop this man from being elected a 5th time. Well, and then God did by fucking killing him.
About January 6th. It's important that we remember exactly what took place. That this was no tourist visit to the Capitol. Most of the footage.
No one says it's a tourist visit, you dishonest pile of trash.
We are about to play has never been seen. The Select Committee obtained it as a part of our investigation. This isn't easy to watch. I want to warn everyone that this video includes violence and strong language. Without objection, I include in the record a video presentation of the violence of January 6th.
Proud of your boy! Proud of your boy! Proud of your boy!
Yeah, just for awareness, be advised, there's probably about 300 Proud Boys. They're marching eastbound in this 400 block of kind of Independence, actually on the mall towards the United States Capitol.
I am not allowed to say what's going to happen today because everyone's just going to have to watch for themselves. But it's going to happen.
Notorious Proud Boy, this woman.
Something's going to happen.
Who's free? Our streets! Who's free? Our streets! Who's free? Our streets!
You hurt you.
We are on your side. Don't make us go against you. Understand the side. Pick a side. These are our streets.
Whoa, hold on. Manlet alert. Manlet alert. Hold on.
Pick a side.
We are the Lollipop Guild. We will stop the Capitol Police. Look at this guy. Holy shit.
These are our streets.
It's the oldest 9-year-old I've ever seen.
$20 a picture.
I hope Mike is going to do the right thing. I hope so. I hope so. Because if Mike Pence does the right thing, we win the election.
That footage of Donald Trump's publicly televised speech has never been seen before. Benny Thompson just told us.
All Vice President Pence has to do is send it back to the states to recertify, and we become president, and you are the happiest people. Mike Pence is going to have to come through for us, and if he doesn't, that will be a sad day for our country.
Again, many people still agree with that statement. Nothing unlawful in what Trump said right there. Nothing unlawful in what he said. Now, Mike Pence had a different legal opinion and exercised that legal opinion as was within his duty to do so, duty and power to choose to read the electoral votes. It's funny because by saying that Mike Pence choosing to read the electoral votes was the correct action, it necessarily implies that he had the choice to not read them, which would give validity to Donald Trump's argument.
Because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
By the way, what Trump said there was 100% true. You don't take back the country with weakness. You take back the country with strength, and you have to be strong. It has nothing to do with violence at the Capitol. This is edited video laying over different times with people who could not have been witness to 2 different events 2 miles away simultaneously. It's so fucking gay.
Cruiser 50, it does look like we're going to have an ad hoc march stepping off here. There's a crowd surge heading
Not
east.
an ad hoc march.
We love Trump. 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 We love Trump.
Notice this. In jail awaiting trial on charges including seditious conspiracy and obstructing an official proceeding. Oh, on charges. Oh, well, is he guilty? I thought we had the presumption of innocence. But apparently we don't. How much longer is this shit? Fucking 10 minutes.
Mike Pence, I hope you're going to stand up for the good of our Constitution and for the good of our country. And if you're not, I'm going to be very disappointed in you. I will tell you right now.
Get back, ladies! Get back, ladies!
By the way, one text from Donald Trump to one person saying, storm the Capitol, storm it, baby, storm it hard, storm it wonderfully. It's a beautiful Capitol, but I've seen better. You should storm it and make it a pretty, beautiful Capitol. Again, I've seen some wonderful ones. You could use some interior designing. If one text from Trump, a Trump staff person, a Trump anybody, to one person who is present there would have made him guilty, and they can't produce even one. Donald Trump is still speaking at this point. Donald Trump is still speaking 2 miles away at the point that the line was breached, by the way. 2 miles away.
We need backup.
Madam Speaker, the Vice President and the United States Senate.
We're going to give riot warnings as soon as the apparatus is here. We're going to give riot warnings. We're going to try to get compliance, but this is now effectively a riot.
49 hours declaring it a riot.
Cruiser 5 to 50, be advised, Cal Police 1 advised they're trying to breach and get to the Capitol.
Yeah, copy.
Hold the line! Hold the line! Hold the line! Hold the line! Hold the line!
42. We're about 5 miles out. We're trying to make our way through all this.
I saw an innocent road cone killed. Hey, that's BG on the scene. This guy was at the Kyle Rittenhouse thing. Remember him? BG on the scene. There we go. Again, my legal advice is not to do any of this.
We have a breach of the Capitol. Breach of the Capitol to the upper level.
Be advised they're requesting additional resources on the east side as they've broken into that window.
Maybe they should show the guy opening the door and letting a whole shitload of people in. Maybe that video should be included. I wonder if it is. You guys, what do you think? Will they show the video of the guy letting people into the building through the door? Is that one going to be included in this compilation? What do you think? Just let me know. Yes or no in the chat.
I know they're trying to kick it in.
Without objection, the chair declares the House in recess pursuant to Clause 12B of Rule 1.
Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving states a chance to certify a corrected set of facts, not the fraudulent or inaccurate ones which they were asked to previously certify.
This guy's reading a Trump tweet.
U.S. demands the truth. Bring out Pence. Bring out Pence. Bring out Pence.
You pepper sprayed another American that was fighting for you, and that's a
Remember all the Trump tweets calling to hang Mike Pence? I remember all of them.
Get him back there! Punch
These guys are walking through the doors like it's a Disney fucking queue. Just, oh, fucking hell. I gotta walk through here. It'll be 10 minutes.
We can't hold this. We're going to get too many fucking people here. Look at this fucking vantage point, man. We're fucked.
It's a lot of people complicit in the conspiracy to overthrow the government. Certainly doesn't look like just a bunch of fucking people angry at a government system that they don't trust anymore.
We need an area for the housing members. They're all walking over now through the tunnels. We're trying to hold the upper deck. We're trying to hold the upper deck now. We need to hold the doors of the Capitol. I need court support. We lost the line. We lost the line. All MPD, pull back. All MPD, pull back up to the.
Legitimately here, I feel bad for the Capitol Police officers who were understaffed by people who knew this was coming. They knew it was coming. And by the way, those Capitol Police officer, the people in charge of the Capitol Police and in charge with the sergeant in command were Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell. They could have adequately staffed the Capitol Police. They knew this. They knew these numbers were coming. They didn't want to do it. And I feel bad for the people that they left high and dry, because no matter what you think about the Capitol Police officers' actions here, they're terrified. They have to be terrified. And no one wants to be in that situation. But that they were left high and dry by congressional leadership who have the authority to call in more people when they knew this was coming, and they all did. They'll tell you, oh, there were all sorts of signs, but somehow none of them knew. Yeah. Yeah. They fucking put these guys' lives in jeopardy. They never needed to be.
Cruiser 50, be advised that Capitol Police is going to start moving their resources inside. They're going to start the M4 officers first.
Oath Keeper stack number one enters.
4 members. The
The doors barricaded. There's people flooded the hallways outside. We have no way out.
In fact, officers still remaining on the House floor, on the third floor, to use the subways themselves. It's time to evacuate so we can secure the members on the other side. Copy.
It's up to us people now, the American people. What are you ready to do? One more time. What are you ready to do? And whatever it takes, I'll lay my life down if it takes. Absolutely. That's why we showed up today.
Again, and I disagree with these people, but they showed up to lay their lives down for what they believed was an injustice committed upon. We have to put this into every indignant claim of injustice that the people on this committee have. Every single person in that crowd felt the same thing, but in the opposite direction. They felt that their democracy was under attack. Again, whether you agree or disagree with their ultimate conclusions, these people believed their country was being overthrown by corporate and political interests being married together. That's what they believed. I know it's cute to have a notion that they're there to commit a coup. They believed they were defending their country from an insurrection in the same way that these weirdos on Congress believe that they were defending their country from an insurrection. You can't have one be true and not the other. Frankly, I think all of them were wrong.
Hey, we're coming in if you don't bring her out. Fuck you, son of a bitch. You back up. I have myself on back now. Get him up. Get him up. Get him up. Hold up. Get him up.
Almost done.
Changing some of that West Carolina for backup.
They were peaceful people. These were great people. The crowd was unbelievable. And I mentioned the word love, the love in the air. I've never seen anything like it.
Trump was talking about the people at his own speech. That was theater. I hope you realize that was theater that was edited together specifically to achieve the purpose that they're going for here. This is not in any way a bipartisan or neutral committee. If they're trying to pass it off that way, then they're fucking lying. And that was obvious.
Pursuant to the order of the committee of tonight, the chair declares the committee in recess for a period of approximately 10 minutes.
10 minutes. These fucking idiots. Here we go. How much longer is this shit? I thought this was almost done. Fuck me.
I want to thank our witnesses for being with us this evening.
Oh
to
my God,
share
this
their
goes way longer than I
firsthand
thought.
account-
Okay, never mind. I'll finish this maybe tomorrow. I'm not going to sit here and do this tonight. I can't. It was announced to be 90 minutes long. I didn't realize it ended up being longer than that. And we had Jeremy on for almost 2 hours. So it's now late, but I'll finish it later, tomorrow, probably sometime. Maybe we'll get Ty Beard on. I know Ty's going to join me on Monday, but he might be able to join me tomorrow evening or tomorrow night for more of this. But I can't sit here and do this shit. It's fucking driving me nuts. We got to do unbreaded and super chats, and that's what we're going to do in just a second here. But this is this is great. It's wonderful. But it's propaganda and it's political theater, and this whole purpose of this, they lost. They lost this. This is important to remember. They lost the public opinion on this, and they lost the impeachment. And it's because they lost the impeachment that they lost the public opinion. That really that sealed the deal, because America watched the impeachment and it didn't change any minds. And if you didn't change minds, you didn't do the impeachment effectively. They know that. They're now trying to rehabilitate that, and they're trying to run this into the 2022 elections, and will continue to run this until the 2024 elections if they can, because it's the only political talking point that the Democrats have had any numerical success with at all. And again, this is irrespective if you're Republican or Democrat. You have to recognize that reality. They've got an economy in recession. They've got gas prices higher than they've been in anybody's remembrance. They've got a jobs report that's garbage. They've got housing prices going through the fucking roof. They've got people who are not employed or employable. They've got student loan debt that is rampant. They have all sorts of problems, and Democrat policies are supposed to fix all of them, and they're not fixing any of them. And right now, the middle class, the working class, is feeling the squeeze. They're feeling the squeeze, and they're not getting the juice out of the Democrats that they elected, frankly. So they have to run on the only thing that has brought them any success. That's why this is happening. That's why it'll continue until something else happens. So that's that.